Greetings, Race community. Brent coming in live from Naples, Florida. It is early March, and I am so excited to be welcoming Amanda Trabue, who's the Vice President for Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement at Western Kentucky University. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Brent. So happy to be here with you today.
Well, you are really happy, and Amanda was sharing, she was a little bit late to recording for a wonderful reason, which is, and she was okay with me sharing, but Amanda and I think a bunch of her peers on the leadership team were just having vaccine day at Western Kentucky. So it is important to share that as we try to frame the context here, depending on when you listen to this show. But it's really exciting to be able to start having that conversation with guests.
Oh, it's so exciting, Brent. And it was out in the community, and I went and got in line today. And you start looking around, and the president and the first lady were several spots behind me. I look up, there's a dean across the way. And so I said it was the who's who of WKU out getting their first vaccination today. So it's a great day already.
I mean, it's amazing. It's basically exactly 1 year later, and it's just I'm sure it's really encouraging, and it had to be. I mean, what was the vibe? Was everybody just all smiles? Were people nervous? I mean, what was the scene?
It felt very positive. I think people were excited. It didn't seem at all, and people were very gracious. And the National Guard was out helping to facilitate lines, and people were just very gracious to them and their support. And the workers were exceptional. I mean, it was just an outstanding experience all around. So
I'm glad to hear it. Well, it's a Friday. We're feeling good. Amanda also had board meetings this week, which we'll talk about a little bit, I suspect. But before we do all of that, why don't you give me a little bit about your background? But let's go back to like 17-year-old Amanda. What was on your mind then? Could you have imagined you'd be in the philanthropy space, or what along the way moved you in this direction?
Gosh, Brent, 17-year-old Amanda liked to do a lot of different things. And I think that's always been part of me. I was the kid that loved to play sports and would be at softball practice or a game and turn around and go to piano lessons in my uniform. Always very involved in a lot of different activities, enjoyed people. My mom would tell you that as a little girl, I'd walk up to somebody in the grocery store and say, I like grapes. Do you like grapes? What's your favorite color? And it's so funny to look back on that now and think of it as a precursor to what I would end up spending my career doing. Which seems to fit so nicely. But I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, Glasgow. We do have a summer Highland Games in Glasgow, Kentucky, and even hosted the International Highland Games 1 year. So that's our small claim to fame. Our marching band in high school actually wore kilts. So wonderful, wonderful hometown experience. I have a wonderful family that mostly also live back in Glasgow as the oldest of three. Girls we're all very close to each other and doing very different things. But, growing up, I thought I wanted to go to the big blue school in the state that is very famous for basketball. And as time became closer to going to college, and 17, 18-year-old Amanda decided I wanted to stay a little bit closer to home, but far enough away to have a good experience. And I'd been exposed, of course, to Western Kentucky University in high school. Visited here for some DECA events, business events, different types of recruitment events. And I think at first really said, all right, I'm just going to go to WKU. Well, quickly, once I got to campus, got involved in campus life, absolutely loved it, and got my first job, which, not unlike many of your other guests, was at the Phonathon. And
it's the gateway drug to advancement.
Absolutely. But first semester, absolutely hated it, and I was going to quit.
Tell me more about that. I mean, give me some of the blooper reel from the first semester of the Phonathon. Anything stand out?
Yeah, I just think it's hard work. It's absolutely hard work, and it was something that I wasn't used to. And calling people, and at that time we were still using paper cards. The next semester, we began the process of transitioning into the automated phone system. But it was just hard work, I think, is what it was. And just the uncomfortableness of people telling you no and hanging up on you. And, just that persistence of knowing you had to keep after it. So I looked around for some other jobs and I didn't really find anything else, of course, that paid as well as Phonathon and fed you every night and provided some bonuses and rewards. So I reluctantly came back, but that's when it really started kind of hitting my stride at Phonathon. And we became automated. Not long after that, I became a student manager, on and on. The rest.
How about highlights from that experience? Or were there moments when you thought, okay, I went from really hating this to being frustrated to getting the hang of it to probably being pretty good at it to leading the team? Were there any like aha moments where you're like, whoa, this is fun. I enjoy this.
Yeah, it was second semester sophomore year. And actually I was at a point, back to earlier reference of me always liking to do a lot of different things. I had taken every general ed course I could take. I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I had no idea. I had taken the intro to teacher education. I was taking some biology and math courses, taking intro to business. I honestly had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was on a phone call one night at the Phonathon. And I, to this day, wish I'd written down who the gentleman's name was. I went through my spiel, asked him for money, and he paused and he said, you know, you're really good at this. I was like, really? I guess maybe I do kind of like it. I guess I have gotten pretty good at it. And that was what switched for me. Probably within days, weeks, whenever I had to declare my major, I went and declared marketing. Went into the business college, and it went on from there. And then I became, a manager of the program. And then once I graduated, moved into the full-time role in alumni relations and annual giving.
I love how poignant that memory is. And I wonder if he hadn't said that. I mean, in certain regard, it was like alumni mentorship, unsolicited mentorship. Like what if he hadn't said that,
And who knew? And I didn't know at that time, right, that this would ultimately be my career. And certainly
right.
I would be sitting in the chair I am today. And that's why it's looking back on it, I really wish I'd written the man's name down, but I do literally remember sitting in the chair, like can have that feeling of when he said that to me. And really now, that was just really that pivotal moment for me now for my career.
I love it. And like so many people, you started your advancement career professionally at WKU. You also pursued your MBA while working, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So just tell me a little bit more about what prompted you to continue going from being a real generalist, loving everything, not having maybe a clear path to then getting clarity and then doubling down by way of your MBA while working part-time, and any perspective on lessons from the MBA that, I don't know, maybe you still think about today.
Yeah, I look back on that time in my career, right when I graduated, and at that time, the annual giving team was housed within the alumni relations and annual giving team. And so I had a dual portfolio of not only managing the Phonathon program, but I also did senior class challenge. I did faculty and staff giving. I had a portfolio of President's Circle prospects that I was managing. I also did alumni chapters. I had reunion activities. I had other alumni events. I look back at that time in my life, and then I started at my MBA. Why not throw something else into the mix? I look back at that time. I've never worked so much in my life, not only professionally, but personally working on school. Lots of nights in the library after Phonathon closed, and we closed out and printed receipts for the evening at 9:30 at night. I'd go to the library and meet up with my team. But I think that it really set a foundation for me of being able to really lean into a lot of different areas of the profession at that time. The reason I pursued the MBA is really for the business aspects and the accounting and the finance and the management. And I really found myself becoming very interested in that piece of it. And for me, once I finished that MBA, I thought I wanted to jump ship and go into the corporate world. Fruit of the Loom's headquarters is here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I saw a marketing job out at Fruit, and I was like, this is my chance. I can stay in Bowling Green, I can get a big corporate job, and I'm going to be set. Power suits and briefcases all day long. So I applied for that job. I was a finalist for the position, and I didn't get it. And I was devastated. I was like, this is my job. This is my chance. as with everything, and what you often find in life is things happen for a reason. And not long after I didn't get that job, the director of development job opened for the College of Business. I applied and I got it. And so I was able to move into major gifts at that point. And for me, I made the choice to move down the fundraising path because of that business background, because I think that in fundraising, philanthropy work, it's a great combination of being able to utilize those business skills and think about the bottom line, about ROI, the management, the marketing too, of course. But it really just, it was a pivotal moment for me.
Well, tell me about that transition, because I mean, and I'm sure it helps you today in your role, because you have done events, you've done, calling on the print cards, you've done, annual giving, direct marketing, but then ultimately moving into director of development with the business school. I mean, that's effectively the shift from marketing to sales. And not everybody wants to call it like that, but going from one-to-many outbound engagement to more one-to-one engagement. Was that a natural transition for you? Being out in the field versus in the office, et cetera. Any memories from like those early visits on the road?
It was. And, having that first position where I was able to have that as a part of my portfolio of work, along with all of those other activities, where I was meeting with leadership annual giving donors. Donald Smith is somebody who was my first boss out of college. He oversaw alumni relations and annual giving. Funny enough, he was actually working on his EDD at the time through Vanderbilt. And he had a coaching class, and he said, I need to coach somebody. You're it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, at that point we walked through, I set up a 100-day plan of when I went into a transition from alumni relations and annual giving into major gifts. And I set out a 100-day plan for myself of what I was going to do in my first 100 days as a director of development. Getting
all right. So you don't hear that very often. And also at that time, we're talking mid 2000s, the idea of a career coach or coaching was not nearly as in vogue as it is today. So let's talk more about what is it, like what was coaching, and then what part of your 100-day plan could potentially be generalizable for the audience.
Yeah, I actually then used it several times after that when I moved jobs or when I was hiring in staff. And I think that it was
great,
a very effective tool to, of course it changes, right? But knowing that you have a roadmap and you have a plan and you're being thoughtful and intentional about it from the outset. I think that's the biggest advantage to doing that. Thinking through who are all the campus partners that you need to meet within that first 100 days. What sort of background and historical information do you need to be reading to understand, the key players? What's the history? Meeting with the dean when you're going into a role like a director of development for a college, and making sure that you understand their vision and what they're trying to accomplish. Setting goals for when am I first going to get on the road? And so when's probably within a month or so, get your feet wet, understand the organization, but get out there and start talking to people and understanding, what the alumni experience and the donor experience was. Looking back on that too, and he was actually writing his dissertation for his educational doctorate on the first 100 days of a college president. And so that's what he modeled this experience for me after. And it, really was just, again, a point in time that I have continued to come back to and utilize in my career.
How common do you think that is? I mean, obviously it's been a part of your life, and I'm sure you make it a part of your organization, but I feel like it's pretty rare to have that kind of structured approach. And oftentimes folks are just thrown into it, or there's, some HR onboarding, but not necessarily here's your game plan for the next 100 days. I mean, I love the concept. Do you hear about it among your peers?
I think it's hit or miss. And I think too, the larger of an organization that you get into, there's maybe pockets of it happening, but I haven't found that a lot of organizations have adopted that type of approach, particularly thinking about someone's onboarding experience outside of human resources and that organization.
So you were fortunate to have somebody sort of take
Absolutely.
you under the wing and get the first 100 days, and tell me about kind of when you reflect on your time in that frontline position with the business school, any major highlight? And then ultimately, you did make the move to Wash U, which is a very different context. And I'd love to hear about that experience too.
Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful because at the point, I was only 3 years removed from undergraduate work and then had just completed my MBA. And so I was able to work with a lot of the professors who I really enjoyed to help raise money for their areas and their support. It was a newer dean at the time. And so I was able to also use my historical context and experience as a student to help bring him into the mold and, help him launch his vision. I will say that when the time came that I chose to explore other opportunities and think about leaving WKU, was one of the hardest decisions I ever made in my career, in my life. I'd at that point been at the institution for 12 years, 4 years as an undergrad, and then 7 years, 7 years professionally. And I was essentially leaving for the first time at that point in my career. But I knew that I needed a change. I knew that I now wanted this as a career. I knew that I needed to do something different and challenge myself. And that dean is one that pushed me to do it. My current VP at the time also pushed me to do it. And off I went to Wash U. And that was actually a connection through a case board and conference committee member that at the time was in our district, District 3. And he had been—
Which, if you don't know, District 3 is a little bit different in the case community, okay? And I think the pandemic has really, really held back District 3.
District 3 is special, and you know that. And I've been extremely involved, and I have to 100% with no doubt say that I would not have been as successful and as passionate about the career if I hadn't been as involved with case. And I think District 3 really, helps nurture that and encourage that. And this was another one of those case connections of a guy who, Mike Worley, who is now at Lander University in South Carolina. But at the time, he was at East Carolina University, and he previously worked at Wash U. He said, "Hey, we've got some jobs over at Wash U. You should check them out." And I was like, "Wash U? Where is Wash U?" Kid from small town Kentucky, really had no context of, elite private institutions. And so I was like, okay, sure. So I apply, really not thinking this. I'm like, okay, it was the first job I applied for out of WKU. Went over there and interviewed. I did not get the first job, which would have been working directly with Mike. It was a regional director traveling to New York City. They didn't think that I could go to New York City. I was stereotyped, and anybody would tell you that. I mean, it was like, oh, she's been in Kentucky. She doesn't really know. I don't think she can. Okay. I was like, no big deal.
You're like, I'm from Glasgow. Come on.
How international can you get? So I actually then ended up getting involved in a couple other job searches and was very close to getting an offer from another institution that Mike Worley had actually connected me to. And he calls me back, and I think he's calling me because his colleague is like, "Hey, we're getting ready to hire her." He was like, "Hey, we want you at Wash U." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" He's like, "We got another regional director position open, and we want you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So when it came down to it, I compared offers, and I really thought about what kind of move I wanted to make. I really thought I could learn a lot for that type of institution, given the opportunity. So I made the choice to move to St. Louis, and I was there about 2 years as a regional director, traveled to the West Coast, which included Seattle, Portland, San Diego, and Kansas City. Throw a little Kansas City in there for good measure, but
I would imagine that had to be kind of scary. I mean, just like given how much, you knew WKU cold, you'd lived it. It was your community, obviously big concentration of folks in Kentucky or the, kind of greater region. To then go elite private in a city you don't know, to cover a region you don't know. I mean, was that just like culture shock, terrifying? I mean,
all of the above.
Yeah.
All of the above.
but also probably super healthy to go through an experience like that.
I will tell anybody today, and I've told lots of people this story, like it was the hardest 2 years of my life, no doubt about it. But I think it was the most transformative 2 years of my life. It was very scary at times. I remember when I moved over there, my dad literally looked at me and said, because he's always lived in the state of Kentucky, in the region where I grew up. And he said, I just don't understand why you want to do this, but we're here for you and we support you. And I know you're going to be great. And it was hard traveling and being out on your own and talking to people. And, there were times where when I went to meet with some folks at WashU that, one couple wanted to basically tell me that my state public school education could not in any way compare to the education that their kids are getting at WashU. And so being able to learn how to deal with that professionally and, kind of reflect and think, oh yeah. And then, but they'd be like, no, and then, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, we've had a bunch of folks on who have gone to their college, started as a Phonathon, end up joining an entry-level role at their own university, eventually break out. But I've never asked somebody this question, which is, how often would somebody say to you, did you go to WashU?
A lot.
Did that come up is it like the first thing donors want to know is like, did you go there? And then when you say no, did you feel like they're immediately, I don't know, passing judgment? I'm just really curious, like, how do you kind of go from where you have such a connection
I would say the majority no. The majority no. There was a few. But I dealt with it definitely more, I think, at WashU than I did at Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that I kind of had to be like, at first I was kind of like, oh, I remember kind of like saying, oh, well, I went to Western Kentucky. And then you just grow in confidence of like, no,
totally.
Western Kentucky University.
Yes.
I'm just as worthy of sitting here in this conversation as anybody else. And
absolutely.
What that was in the development shop at WashU, it's a huge organization and there were people from everywhere in every institution. And frankly, most of the people I associated with didn't go to WashU that were working in that organization. And so, but you talk about a learning experience of going from, an institution at WKU where at that time, probably 50 to 55 people total in the division, WashU at the medical center, and the whole fundraising, alumni development enterprise, 350 people, 400 people, whatever it was. Shocking, right? Of like, wow. But I learned so much about myself, the volume that's expected in visits there. At the point I was there, they were very activity driven on get out and see people. And I look at that 2 years, it's high burnout, lots of turnover in those regional jobs because you're on the road nonstop. But I spent a lot of time in different parts of the country. I'd never traveled before.
So favorite trip, getting to the Pacific Northwest, see these, anything stand out from WashU where you're like, wow, I never would have gone here or seen this if it weren't for this experience?
Let me say, there is one thing I always tell development officers when they are traveling is to spend time in the cities that you travel to. Take time out of your schedule to see the sites, go to the museums, do activities, because I think that shows your donors that you're meeting with and your alumni that you care and that you're engaged. And I think it always is great for building that rapport. So I always would spend time when I was in those cities trying to do things. My favorite memory, Seattle, it's just such a different part of the country. Going to the fish market, there was an oyster bar that I loved to go to, and I would go frequently. The people at the Hilton downtown Seattle knew me in the executive lounge because, when you've got diamond status, you get your breakfast and you go up there and see the same people every month when you're there.
It's fair to say that the Glasgow oysters are not as competitive as the Seattle oysters, right?
Oh my gosh, no. San Diego, I would say I'm a Hilton girl, so I'd say at the Hilton Torrey Pines. And
yes.
it's just you look at that and how, you take the little Glasgow girl and throw her out into the world. And I think I just remember being in awe a lot of seeing this country and just being appreciative of having the experience. And yeah, I mean, and it just further, the more I got into that job, I knew that I wanted to keep doing it, but I never felt settled in St. Louis. I think for me, the road 24/7. I'd formed some good friendships at work, but I never really settled in St. Louis or the community. And I knew that my next move, I wanted to be someplace that I felt like was more like home, and a place that I knew I could spend more than a few years. And about 2 years in is when I decided to start looking, and saw a job at Vanderbilt, actually in the law school, and applied. Made it through, I think, 1 or 2 rounds. Didn't get invited to campus. I was like, okay, it's too soon. Haven't built up my resume enough at WashU. Several months later, position came open for Peabody College at Vanderbilt. And I hesitated. I was like, oh, I'm not going to put my application in. I just applied again. Something kept telling me, why not? You never know who's in the pool. And I went ahead and threw my application in the pool, and long story short, I got the job. So I was able to move to Nashville, which was about an hour and a half from where my family was located. Big city I was very familiar with. It's one that we'd spent a lot of time in, is being close to Bowling Green. And so I was thrilled to get the opportunity to go to Vanderbilt.
And it stuck. I mean, you spent 9 years there. I know you built some great relationships that have led to where you are now. But when you think about the highlights of your time at Vanderbilt, I mean, you started in basically, I think this time in 2010, and were there for over 9 years. I mean, what were some of the things that really stood out during that experience?
Vanderbilt went through a tremendous transformation during that time of its fundraising operation. The Vice Chancellor, Susie Stallcup, had arrived less than a year before I got there. So a lot of transformation happened from what I would call a fundraising organization to a fundraising organization. A lot of implementation of metrics and accountability, portfolio building. I was a new gift officer for the college at that time, based upon a feasibility study, said they needed another gift officer for Peabody. So, I came in and had to build my portfolio from scratch, which is hard work. I was basically given a lot of discovery names and told to get after it. And it took a couple of years. I mean, it's hard work. It is hard work to build out a portfolio and get a whole lot more no's and a whole lot more, I'm good with making my annual gift conversation. But the persistence paid off. And Dean Camilla Benbow of the college is just an incredible thought leader, researcher, and leader of that college. And she really empowered me during that time. And we had such a great working relationship together. And, over that time and my advancement within that college was able to really, we closed some really great gifts and, did some really wonderful things.
And at the same time, WKU is calling you back to the Hill.
And you alluded to this earlier. President Tim Caboni, who is our president here at WKU, was a faculty member at Vanderbilt when I arrived back in 2010. And Tim is very well known in the philanthropy circles. His actual research interest is institutional advancement. He has spent a lot of time. He built out the institutional advancement program in higher education at Vanderbilt, which a lot of colleagues in our industry went through that program. And so I knew President Caboni at Vanderbilt. We'd spent some time together. He was there about 2 years when I first arrived before he left to go to Kansas. And next thing I knew, he turns back up at my alma mater as president. And
did you see the press release and just notice it, or did it kind of?
Funny story. Yeah. So at Vanderbilt, we officed at the Lowe's Vanderbilt Tower across the street from campus. And one of my colleagues at the office said, I think I saw Tim Caboni in the parking garage today. And I was like, really? I said, that's interesting. And not too long after that, I'd seen on Twitter or social media or something, they were like, Board of Regents are conducting interviews in Nashville for the president of WKU. And I was like, that's interesting. And I still I knew that he was interested in seeking out a president's role. But yeah, it wasn't long after that he was announced. So, of course, I started closely following what was happening. I was always closely following, very connected to WKU, even when I was gone. Became even more interested once he arrived. And then 2 years later, I was co-chairing Case District 3 Conference in Atlanta. And we asked President Caboni to come speak several months prior. And then I guess it was probably a month or two after that conference is when they were going to start the process to hire the vice president's position. And he sat down with me at that conference and we had a great talk, a great conversation. And the rest is history.
So you took the position, you accepted the role and joined as vice president in June of 2019, which must seem like 10 years ago at this point, but it was not that long ago, but it was. So it's June 2019, which was basically when we were getting connected as well. But what was it like when you got there in the normal times, in the before times, as people are calling it? It had been a while. I know you'd stayed connected, but from 2008 to 2019, did it feel the same? Did it feel very different? You know, obviously new president, you know, he wanted your vision of the future, not the past, but what did it feel like after, you know, kind of 10 years away?
In some ways, it felt like I had never left. So, you know, there were still a lot of familiar faces around. There was still a lot of donors in our portfolios as I started digging in that I knew and I was familiar with, which is great to come back to a place where you already have relationships. The university had gone through 2 tough years of budget reductions. We had a wonderful president for 20 years who was an alum of the institution and did wonderful things. And we had seen an enrollment decline. And so there was some really tough decisions that had been made just before my arrival that, you know, the campus was still reeling from. And so to come in at that time, I think there was still a lot of uncertainty about the future and, you know, how are we going to get this ship turned around? I have to say for our organization, in philanthropy and alumni engagement, and, you know, this is something I've shared with our team, so this is not me, you know, saying anything that I wouldn't say in front of them, is, you know, I walked into the office and I felt it was very tired. I felt people were just going through the motions. They'd done their job and a lot of them had done it for a while. And, you know, they were just going through the motions. You know, it was kind of cluttered around the office. You know, and now when I look back on that, I think that visual of how the office looked was really like how people felt and how, you know, they needed a jolt. We needed to pick ourselves up.
Yep. We
needed to think differently and we needed to challenge ourselves. And yeah, you know, you and I met probably a month after that at another case event, summit in Boston. And I think that it was just one of those things where right place at the right time, me coming into this going, what am I going to do? I'm looking at reports, I'm digging into some of those numbers where I'm like, oh my gosh, like our pipeline doesn't exist. Our participation percentage has just fallen off a cliff. And what are we doing to address it? And I start talking to folks, we're not.
Right. And I think, look, like, I'll be honest, at that time, Evertrue had a partnership with Western Kentucky, and I would have scored it as one of our least successful partnerships. We were not delivering. You barely knew. There definitely was no strategic, you know, approach to our work, and we take responsibility for that. But it really was an opportunity where, you know, you came in, understood the context, and wanted to push immediately for innovation in a pragmatic way. At the same time, it was frustrating for us because we were looking at the data and seeing there is so much in digital engagement. There is wealth, like there is real untapped potential, but these people are not having a relationship with Western Kentucky. They're either lobbing in their annual gift in response to direct marketing or Phonathon, or they're not on again, off again, but there was no real strategic approach to it. And I do think, like, just whether it's Tim or you, sometimes we talk about Western Kentucky, or we talk about Evertrue, or we talk about whatever organization, and it really is about the people, and leadership matters so much, where you can take the exact same university, the exact same alumni affinity, like the exact same even staff, but with the right kind of leadership, vision, goal setting, motivation. It matters so much. It's not Western Kentucky. It's the combination of specific people. And I think what was so fun after that case dinner at Barcelona, or wherever we were.
Barcelona.
It's a restaurant in Boston, not actually in Spain. But we were able to come out of it and start putting together a game plan for really building a new approach to personalized relationship building, digital first. This was pre-pandemic, but it was really an opportunity to just start from scratch. And you had a mandate, I think, from President Capone to take a big swing and to make some bets. But I'd love to just hear a little bit more about, not from my vantage point, from yours, when you saw kind of the missed opportunity in the data, and heard about this concept of donor experience. What were some of the things you wrestled with, frankly? And then I'd love to kind of just get your perspective so far.
Sure. I think for us, I'm like, this work takes time. Building relationships with people takes time. I tell our staff often that it's taken a long time for us to get to the point where we were when I got here almost 2 years ago. It's going to take us a little bit of time to get back out of it. But as long as we're making progress, that's what's important. I admit I'm not a patient person. I like for things to happen. I like them to happen quickly. So that's something that I work on myself, and something that I, strive to do better in. But I knew that we needed something drastic to change the way that we were doing our business. For example, I knew that our leadership annual giving officers at the time, I call it the phone book method. Print out your Excel spreadsheet. What city are you traveling to? Sort it and run down it. See who'll take your call. Really no strategy or approach. I talked to them. One of the things I did when I arrived here was I within the first 3 weeks, had a meeting with every single person in the organization and asked them the same set of questions and said, what are our opportunities? What do you enjoy doing? What are things that you think that, and themes started to emerge, and people just felt like they didn't have any concrete direction. It's not that they weren't willing to do something different. They just needed to be pushed and feel like, they were contributing in a meaningful way. It was, I'm just kind of doing my work, but I don't really think I'm doing anything that's helping the organization. So, thinking through that, we are very restricted by budget resources. Like I said, I'd come in after 2 tough years. I was facing another significant budget cut to our operating budget because we had gone through a RIF on campus. We were trying to preserve all of our positions. So it was another big hit to our operating. And so I started talking to my team about, okay, what can we do to scale up effectively and efficiently, and do something creatively. And that's where we started talking. I started thinking about this digital, and I knew some other schools had started doing the digital work, but I also frankly knew that from our standpoint, our size of institution, the lack of budget that I had, and the expertise of our personnel, we couldn't have done this on our own. There's no way. It would have taken us probably 2 years to try and put all the technology together, do the analysis on the portfolios, get all of that together. And so once we started talking about that concept, for us in our size of institution, the partnership is what really pushed me over the edge to say, okay, well, this is something we can turn around in a few months of implementation and get our callers and our gift officers in this program. So for me is what really, put me.
Well, and I think like a lot of it is rooted in data, and we saw you were either going to have to hire a whole bunch more gift officers, which was not realistic in the context of your budget, or not build relationships with these people. And we just felt like there's got to be a way to bring something that, back to your roots, is high volume, like a call center, but much more personalized with an actual relationship building opportunity, so that you actually might know who the guy is who told you that you're really good at this, because you would have had an opportunity to build a relationship in an ongoing way. And so that was really the origin of what we now call Evertrue Premier, this donor experience officer management program that has already expanded beyond that, both up and down your giving pyramid. But when we sat down in November of 2019, I remember looking at some data where you've got around 100,000 alumni, 90,000, something like that.
About 120.
Okay, yeah, 120. And so we were just sort of a really rough analysis, which was, okay, 120,000 constituents, 7,000 or so were giving on an annual basis, which was down from an average of 8,000. But just over the course of the 5 years prior to us sitting down, 15,000 people had given. And all time, there had been over 37,000 donors. So on one hand, you would look at the numbers and say, we have a low participation rate, or we only have 8,000 people giving out of our 120,000. But the reality is, at some point in their journeys, over 35,000 people had felt that combination of affinity and a willingness to cut a check. And then when you start cutting down into the data, there's some incredible high net worth lapsed donors in many cases who did love the institution. And you're not going to recapture those people with a transactional call center. They're not going to be inspired by a piece of mail, no matter how good it is. Doesn't mean that that stuff can't be a component of a relationship building program, but you really got to actually build the relationship. So that was the catalyst to launch this program. Not just let's hire some digital gift officers, or DXOs as we call them, but let's start with the data, identify the absolute best unassigned prospects, and then equip the team with tools and approaches to really do high volume outreach, more personalized than a call center, more efficient than a frontline team. And you took a leap of faith on us, and we, kind of vice versa. We're like, is this going to, the work the way that we hope it will? And obviously, we're super energized, and we appreciate you being on the show today. But I'd love just your perspective on that journey. I mean, it seems like forever ago, but also yesterday in a certain regard, and what you've learned so far.
Yeah, I mean, it has been. I told somebody the other day, I was catching up with a colleague at Vanderbilt that I'm still great friends with, and just chatting about what's been going on, and, how are you doing? Do you miss us? And I said, of course I miss you sometimes. Like I had almost a decade of my life, almost 25% of my life spent at a very wonderful place that I love the people, I love my work there. But I look back now on the last year, in which, it's been tough with the pandemic, but we've utilized that crisis. We did not let that crisis go to waste. And we have really utilized that time to refine who we are and lean into this program and how this program could help us connect with more people than ever before. And it's been the most fun year of my career, bar none. I wouldn't say that we haven't had some rough times, of course. Everybody adapting to the virtual environment, the challenges of family and kids and all the things that have happened, but really transforming our culture and our institution. And I think this program has been integral into changing the culture and changing that we are going to be accountable to our teammates and to our organization, that we're going to be resilient and that we're going to adapt to change. We've changed our approach to how we look at our portfolios with this program all along the way. And I think that's what's great. We work with Coleman on your team, and we worked with Kevin out of the gate, and both of them have just been incredible. Coleman and Ron Wilson, who's on our team, who manages the DXO program, are on the phone every day with each other, talking about it. We can't wait till Coleman can come to Kentucky, and he says he's gonna wear his cowboy boots and come down and see us. But it's just been one of those things that it's been so much fun. And I just know that this is going to change our giving. It's going to change our alumni connections to this university. It's going to take some time, and we know that, but it's the right thing to do. We are connecting with people in a very personal way. We're already starting to see people who have reached out to say, It's so cool. You sent me this video. That's so cool. You followed up with our students that are now in the program are doing exceptional work and having a lot of positive conversations out of that. So it's just been a really, really fantastic now year and a half of working together.
Well, thank you so much. Let's talk a little bit about the staff, because I know that your colleagues, right, when you walked in, you're like, how can I inspire the group? How can I really get people motivated? And you've got colleagues Ryan and Haley and Mitchell and others who are in this program, and then we can talk about the student element as well. But just tell me a little bit about the before and after that you've seen with some of your colleagues.
It's been transformational for them in their careers too. Haley is one in particular who was really craving direction, craving training, and she's incredible. She had a call this past week, and she actually shared this with our team, where I've talked a lot with our team about when you're having conversations with donors, you're not going in and saying, well, it's $10,000 to endow a scholarship. It's what sort of impact do you want to have? You're making sure you're asking those open-ended big questions to really get at the root of what people want to do and what their passions are. And she shared with our team this week during our team meeting yesterday. She said, I am so excited. She said, I've had that question in my back pocket for almost a year. And I finally got the opportunity this week with a donor on the phone to say, what sort of impact do you want to have? And there it went from there. The guy's like, well, what does it take to fully endow a scholarship? And I think my brothers want to get involved. And it was just an incredible call, and to see how happy she was. And she's, just her development has been wonderful. Ryan was the same way. I think Ryan is involved in things all across our community. He's the president of NAACP. He's a volunteer on campus. He teaches courses. He just had his second baby this week. He is a wonderful person and needed direction. And so this program has helped him know every day when I come in, who do I call? Who do I connect with? Just the way that we work through these processes, I think, has really created, and they're working more than they've ever worked before. That's the thing too, is their days are more full and more busy than they've ever been, but they're more happy. They're productive. They're closing gifts. Every single one of them, Mitchell included, has also, he had some experience in insurance before he came to work with us. And so he is very familiar with sales and is very clear with, who he needs to close, and translating that now into higher ed has been a really good shift for him. And so every single one of them have really, it's just been remarkable. It's been great.
And just as a point of reference, if you're listening and you're not totally familiar with the program, in this case, Haley, Mitchell, and Ryan, who Amanda's referencing, are all carrying portfolios of 1,000 people, and they're not traveling, right? And this was pre-pandemic, and
Right.
Certainly coming out of the pandemic, I think this kind of work is going to become the norm as opposed to the exception. But even through early February, this fiscal year 2021, Haley, Mitchell, and Ryan have all been in touch, not just one time, but with multiple times, with over 600 prospects each. And we've got several months to go here in fiscal 2021. And so it really, we keep talking about that idea of more personalized than a call center, but much higher volume and more efficient than a frontline fundraising team. Do you agree with that? Would you modify it? You started in the call center. You've watched that space obviously change a lot and struggle in a certain regard, but then also frame it through, like, we've got this amazing student group now. And I really look at your student DXO program as pre-professional philanthropy training. This should be an on-ramp to become a future development officer in a really, really systematic way.
Absolutely. That's what the call center was. But I really view this as more of a professional opportunity. And, I told all the students when we went through their training back last fall, I said, I hope that you all develop a passion for this career, but I also know that many of you have dreams outside of this. One's going to med school. Others are going to other professional programs or have other career aspirations, but I know that the skills they're going to learn through this program are going to carry them into their careers. We also have a few that we're talking to or graduating in a few weeks that we're very optimistic we're going to retain on our staff. And the beauty of it is they will be able to literally graduate and walk across the stage. And if they want to start with us on Monday, they know exactly what to do. And that's what's.
Well, we've got our eyes on a few of your SDXOs
yes,
too.
Brent,
So we
stay
might
away.
be competing a little bit. I know, but
So yeah, it's
great.
exciting. It's so exciting to really, because I love this. I love this work. Absolutely love the work. And I love sharing it with younger colleagues and professionals who have a passion for it and can develop a passion for it. And, to be able to create this pipeline of talent for us is really critical piece as we move along in this work. But to your point, I think, I was a person that, has spent a good portion of my career now traveling a lot. When I was at WashU and Vanderbilt, that was absolutely the model of traveling, being out, the trips I made. I had all my, status and all the things that I loved about that work. But now when you see what you can do in this very methodical, very strategic way, there's absolutely no reason why you should be going on a plane to go see people if you haven't had conversations with them.
So let's talk about that, because you just got your vaccine and the dean's getting the vaccine and the president's getting the vaccine, and it's vaccine day at Western Kentucky. But we are hearing a lot of people say things like, I can't wait to get back out on the road. And I mean, I've been in 25 states in the last 10 months. So I've kind of been on the road, but I haven't been with people, right? So there is an element of, we all do want to get back together, but how do you balance that with frankly, the inefficiency of going out to Seattle and doing those things, or trying to get to Washington, D.C. And I think what we've been saying a lot, both to the Evertrue team, but also in the market, is I think low ROI advancement travel needs to be gone forever, but high ROI travel absolutely needs to come back. Tell me about what you just said, which is, if you're trying to get to know someone, you should not be hitting the road the way that we would have before. That can now be done digitally.
Absolutely. I think that it's built into the training. It is built into making sure we're asking the right questions of the people that we're contacting. And when I agree with you 100%. I want to meet with people as well. I want to see people. There is a place when you're getting ready to close.
Case District 3.
Yeah.
District 3. Yeah.
When you get to the point of, really fleshing out some ideas too. I mean, there absolutely is a point, but from those first steps, that identification and that qualification, it can be done absolutely over Zoom, over phones, if you're doing it and you're doing it in the right way. And, I think about in the past of just, we used different operations I've worked in. It's like, okay, well, if you get 5 appointments in whatever city, you can travel there. And it was never really, well, what are you going to accomplish? Or, oh, you got 5 visits. Great, go.
Yeah.
I think
and
pre-work in that strategy.
We did a webinar last week where we talked about, the before and after, and the old way was 8 visits a month. And we think the new way is 8 visits a week, or maybe 8 visits a day. And I'm sure you've had days where, have you had 8 visits? And probably now President Camboni can join, and then the dean can join, and a faculty member can pop in, and that might be way better for a donor than you going out to Seattle, staying at the Hilton, having some oysters, and then having a few visits. And no offense, that is part of the job, and some people are attracted to that part of the job. But at the same time, I just don't know. Yeah, I just think it's got to look a lot different going forward.
Yeah,
I would love to kind of get your perspective, because we've talked a little bit about the idea of the DXO program that we're doing, but you're not a DXO. The president's not a DXO, but a lot of the principles are still applying. And I'd just love to get your perspective on conversations you've been able to loop the president into that you never could have done before with travel schedules and trying to coordinate, or any elevated donor experiences that you've been able to be a part of that were actually facilitated because we're now in this Zoom economy.
Yes, we actually transitioned back in the fall. We had started a tradition of a Summit Awards the night before our homecoming celebration on a Thursday evening. And that's where we did all of our Philanthropists of the Year, top awards of the institution. And so we decided to stretch that out over a volunteer, a National Philanthropy Week. in November around National Philanthropy Day. And so every day we highlighted a student philanthropy award, a faculty staff philanthropy award, honored our National Philanthropist of the Year. And so we coordinated some virtual surprises to some of those folks that received those awards, and to be able to pull him in and, record and see their surprise and integrate that into some video work that we did. One of our National Philanthropist of the Year is a former football player, and is very generous to the football program, also to some academic programs on campus. And so we planned that also around a football game. And so we were able to take them down on the field, socially distance, and incorporate some of the work from the week where we shared with them they were getting this award, and then stories from the student athletes, and, tears in your eyes, wonderful experience. So, that was a highlight for us that week. We've made several visits together virtually with folks that, to your point, when you look at trying to coordinate everybody's schedules and get him off campus and align it with theirs, it's been wonderful. Our DXO team and our major gift officers now are also incorporating a lot of video. We had a faculty member last week that one of our officers reached out because the alum mentioned, Dr. Kessler was amazing. He was so inspirational to me. She emailed Dr. Kessler. Dr. Kessler, within like 30 minutes, sent her a 2-minute video, which she immediately sent off to.
That's amazing. I mean, this is that to me is the kind of thing that we have only not even scratched the surface. I mean, how do we make that
as well? Yeah.
How do we make that the norm, right? Where it is, you don't need the faculty member to manage the relationship or to get in the weeds. But if you can have that surprise and delight moment via an iPhone routed to the donor, how much better is that than just the officer taking them to lunch or whatever? It's like so much better and way more cost effective than the officer taking them out to lunch.
Oh yeah. And I think that it's putting yourself out there and pushing people, because I think it's so out of the people, it's so outside of people's comfort zone to be able to do this, because they're so used to doing it the way we've always done it. And so once you try it a few times, like, oh, that was pretty cool. Oh, I got a really great reaction. Maybe I'll try it some more. And so that's where I'm starting to see our team now, some of them in it almost a year. Others have been working in this, really concentrated digital space for about 6 months. Are starting to become much more comfortable. Now they're getting so much more creative. We had one of our DXO officers, a former president, was in her portfolio. And she's so creative. She walked out behind the building where the sign is, it says the president parks here. And she took her intro video in front of the president's spot. Another gift officer who went in front of a fraternity house because the donor had made gifts to the fraternity house and the guys were hanging out on the porch. And so she quickly got the fraternity members to tell him thank you for the gift. And
I love it.
I love it. The videos. The creativity has just been booming, and it's just getting people outside of their comfort zone, and me continuing to encourage and push them to take risk. I've told them all along, look, I am not going to fault you if you try something and it fails, if you learn from it. Now, don't embarrass yourself or embarrass the university. That's rule number 1. But otherwise, if you're trying new things and continually pushing that envelope, let's go. Like I'm so excited by that and want our team to know that I'm behind them and I support them, because it's me who, if something happens, it's not them. Yes. I've got their back, and go.
But you know it. I mean, we're competing for attention, right? We are competing with TikTok. We're competing with Snap. We're competing with Instagram. People only have so much time in their day. And if it's not relevant, interesting, funny, emotional, nobody has time for it.
You might as well not do it.
We're not going to compete. We're competing against fruit. We're competing against.
I've even done that like over the last year. And I think some of our team has looked at me like I'm crazy, because they're like, hey, we need to send out this social post, or we need to drop this email, and I'm like, why? Because that's what we always do when we send out a newsletter, an event invitation, or whatever. And I'm like, but why? And I'm like, think about all the emails we're sending. Scale it back. Let's be more thoughtful. Let's be more intentional. Let's be more creative. Outside of just the digital engagement work that we've done, our team's been exceptionally creative in the marketing space. Our day of caring a year ago, we're planning for our second day of caring on April 15th. It went so well for us also on a enrollment front. Stabilizing our enrollment, growing our enrollment is everybody's job on this campus. And that is one thing the president has made 100% clear. And we do our part in that. Day of Caring last year on April 9 was such a great yield event, not only for our alumni, but then our students. We had people pushing out social media on their own. Everybody on campus participated, that we were like, why are we going to do a Day of Caring? Yes, giving is part of Day of Caring, because giving is caring as well. But really making a part of that as more of a campus-wide marketing event, feel-good event, really, really worked well for this institution. And we're planning our next one that I'm really excited about on that front as well.
I love it. Amanda, every time we catch up, I'm just so fired up. I'm super inspired. I think you're one of just the great emerging, leaders in the space who is willing to take some risk and mix it up a little bit in a pragmatic way. You're not just, throwing
really
everything against the wall,
money.
But, really trying to be pragmatic about making an impact in the short term while setting WK up to be stronger and healthy for the long term. I have to ask, where are you in the hiring thaw versus freeze sort of, context right now? And how do you see that playing out over the next year?
Our university we've stabilized our budget, and enrollment was stronger this past year than we anticipated given a pandemic, which is just exceptional. It's a lot of creative work on our administration's team on some new scholarship programs. So, it's good that we are entering a phase of being able to lift that fog. We've held it down with a lean team over the past few years, and I'm really encouraged that it looks like we're probably going to be able to hire a couple of new DXO officers. Hopefully a few of those SDXOs will roll right into those roles. We're looking at some new roles on our alumni engagement team as well. And again, we've reimagined what those roles look like, more focused on engagement, versus events and those type things. So looking forward to that. As you mentioned earlier, I'm coming off board meetings today and gave a really, really great presentation about where we are with cash flow in this program. And the president, really thanked our team for the hard work. And he said, we're going to work on their team not being as lean very soon. So that was recorded. I'm very optimistic that we'll have some more jobs opening soon, but we're doing great things. We have a lot of fun here, and I'm excited to watch the operation grow.
Amanda, if people want to stay in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn is the best place to connect. You can also find me on the wku.edu website. But I love connecting. I love mentoring, I love networking, and would love to hear from folks if they would like to connect.
It's Friday afternoon. It's almost 5 o'clock. Amanda has had board meetings, a vaccine, and a podcast recording. What a Friday. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Brent.
I really, really appreciate your time. And I would encourage everybody listening, look up Amanda on LinkedIn, reach out to her. And I hope that you'll build some new relationships coming out of this.
Thank you, Brent. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.